Growing food in freezing climates was not just difficult, it was a daily struggle to stay alive. A single mistake could mean empty storerooms when the snow began to fall. But medieval farmers were far from helpless. They had techniques, routines, and clever tricks that helped them face the cold season head-on, starting long before winter arrived. As the air grew colder and daylight hours shortened, villages burst into action. Farmers knew their lives depended on what they accomplished before the frost hardened the ground. Their first job was deep plowing. Using sturdy wooden plows tipped with iron and pulled by teams of oxen, they turned the soil before it froze solid. If they waited even a few weeks too long, the earth would become so hard they might as well try skating on it. This early plowing kept the ground loose and rich with nutrients through the cold months. Manure was a priceless resource for medieval farmers. Every pile of waste from their animals was collected and spread thickly across the fields. They covered the manure with straw and fallen leaves, creating a natural mulch. This layer helped keep the earth warmer, sometimes by as much as 10 degrees, and broke down slowly to feed the soil. In a way, medieval farmers were early pioneers of recycling, transforming waste into nourishment long before going green was a phrase. Water control was another skill that made all the difference. Nothing destroyed crops faster than soil soaked in water that froze into solid ice. To avoid this, farmers used simple wooden spades to dig long systems of ditches. Some villages built drainage networks that stretched for miles. These channels directed extra water away from the fields, keeping the soil from freezing and lifting young roots out of the ground. Their knowledge of drainage was so advanced that even modern engineers could learn from their designs. The timing of all this work was carefully chosen. Many communities had specific dates marked for plowing, guided by both the seasons and the phases of the moon. Some believed that fields prepared during a waning moon would yield better harvests, a tradition that a few farmers still honor today. By the time snow began to fall, the bare fields were not dead, but waiting, full of hidden life ready to awaken in spring. Everything the farmers had done in autumn decided whether they would feast or starve. With the land prepared, they faced their next challenge. They had to pick crops tough enough to survive the cold. Medieval farmers could not simply plant whatever they wanted. Centuries of trial and error taught them which plants could withstand bitter winters. Winter grains became the lifeline of the North. Rye was especially valuable because it grew well, even in regions too cold for other grains. This hardy crop was like a swimmer who enjoyed diving into icy water. Farmers sowed rye seeds in late autumn, letting them rest beneath the snow all winter. When the first warmth returned in spring, those seeds would wake and grow early, giving farmers a head start before other crops could even sprout. Rye became the foundation of life in cold regions. Archaeological findings show that more than 70% of the grain grown in northern Europe was rye. Most households depended on rye bread every single day. Vegetables also played a critical role in survival. Tough crops such as turnips, cabbages, and onions could endure light frost without dying. Farmers planted them in late summer so they would be nearly mature when the first deep freeze arrived. Cabbage was particularly valuable because one plant could be used in many ways. It was the all-purpose tool of medieval vegetables eaten raw, cooked, or fermented into sauerkraut that could last for months in storage. Farmers also learned that planting certain crops together improved their chances. Beans and peas would climb up the stalks of taller grains like natural ladders. Meanwhile, these climbing plants returned nitrogen to the soil, helping the grains grow stronger. It was a perfect partnership. One provided support while the other offered nourishment. Another clever approach was to grow short crops between taller ones. The bigger plants blocked the cold winds, creating a warmer pocket for the smaller ones to thrive. Historical records suggest that this kind of mixed planting increased total harvests by up to 25%. For many villages, That extra food meant the difference between comfort and hunger. With their cold-resistant plants in the ground, farmers still had to solve one last problem. They needed to keep their crops warm when temperatures dropped dangerously low. Without modern technology, they came up with creative ways to protect their plants. One of their smartest methods was the manure hotbed. Fresh animal waste heats naturally as it decomposes. Farmers dug shallow trenches, filled them with manure, and added a layer of soil before planting seeds on top. These people knew the worth of their livestock waste long before garden stores began selling it in bags. As the manure broke down, it released heat that could raise the soil's temperature by as much as 15 degrees for several weeks. That warmth kept roots from freezing and allowed growth to continue even in frigid air. Wind was another threat that farmers learned to manage. Cold gusts could destroy plants that might otherwise survive frost. To protect them, farmers built windbreaks called wattles by weaving flexible branches into fences. These woven barriers blocked the worst of the wind while still letting sunlight pass through. Crops grown behind wattle fences often produced almost 30% more food than those exposed to open air. Medieval farmers even created early versions of greenhouses, using glass or clay covers called cloches to shelter delicate plants from the cold. Through skill, observation, and a little ingenuity, medieval farmers learned how to make life grow, even when the world around them froze. Their survival was not luck. It was the result of hard work and centuries of wisdom passed down from those who refused to let the cold win. These bell-shaped covers were carefully placed over individual plants to hold in warmth. Medieval vegetables were tucked in for the night beneath their own glass shelters, which often received better care than the farmers themselves. During the day, the sun heated the air inside, and when evening came, that trapped warmth kept the plants safe from freezing temperatures. For larger garden plots, farmers built cold-framed simple wooden boxes with see-through lids that protected entire rows of crops. For their most valuable produce, some used slanted wooden frames covered with parchment coated in oil, which allowed sunlight to filter through while sealing out the chill. These easy but effective devices could stretch the growing season by as much as 40 days in certain areas. The most successful medieval gardens made use of every one of these techniques at the same time. Wattle fences guarded the outside edges, manure hotbeds warmed the soil below, and cloches sheltered delicate leaves above. Once their plants were shielded from the worst of winter, farmers turned to nature itself for more warmth. Rather than relying only on artificial heat from manure or coverings, medieval farmers became experts at using natural warmth already present in their surroundings. They understood how to cooperate with the environment instead of struggling against it. Stone walls, for instance, did far more than mark boundaries. Farmers with sharp eyes planted their tenderest crops along the south-facing sides of these walls. During daylight hours, the stones absorbed sunlight and heat. When the temperature dropped after sunset, that stored warmth slowly radiated back out, forming small patches of soil that stayed several degrees warmer than open ground. These stone barriers not only kept out wandering animals, they also served as free heaters once darkness fell. In very cold regions, some communities even built curved stone walls that concentrated the heat in certain spots, creating sheltered areas where fragile plants could survive. The layout of entire fields often revolved around how sunlight moved across the land. South-facing slopes received nearly 40% more sunlight than level ground in the north. That extra solar energy made the soil warmer and more fertile. Medieval farmers saved these valuable spots for their most important crops or for those that were easily damaged by frost. Records from monastery gardens reveal that herbs planted on southern slopes ripened up to 2 weeks earlier than the same plants grown elsewhere. One of the most imaginative uses of natural warmth came from gardens located beside livestock pens. The heat produced by animals' bodies slightly raised the air temperature around them, providing a modest but vital warmth to nearby plants. Farmers quickly realized that their animals provided more than milk and meat. They were living heaters as well. A barn with 20 cows could lift the temperature of nearby soil by as much as 4 degrees on cold nights. That small increase often saved whole crops from being destroyed by frost. In some areas, people even built houses and animal shelters on the north sides of gardens. This blocked icy winds while letting heat from daily chores drift toward the crops. Smoke from cooking fires was sometimes directed through shallow tunnels beneath raised planting beds before escaping, warming the roots above. With their gardens benefiting from both natural and artificial warmth, farmers had to prepare for the next step. They needed to make sure that seeds and young plants survived until spring. Their clever storage methods worked astonishingly well without modern tools. Seeds were among a farmer's most treasured possessions, since without them there would be no new crops. The first step in preservation was drying. After harvest, seeds were spread out on pieces of cloth in sunny, airy places until all moisture was gone. They understood that even a little dampness could cause rot or early sprouting. Medieval farmers followed basic storage principles long before any written guides appeared. Keep seeds dry, cool, and safe from pests. Once dried, the seeds were sealed in clay jars. These vessels kept mice and insects out, while still allowing a bit of airflow to prevent mold. Clay naturally regulates humidity, helping seeds stay viable for several years. Some villages even mixed herbs such as tansy with their stored seeds to drive away bugs. Many seeds lasted best at slightly cool temperatures just above freezing. Underground cellars or rooms carved into hillsides offered perfect conditions. Some of these storage spaces stayed within 5 degrees of the same temperature all year long, which was impressive without the help of any thermostat. Root vegetables meant for replanting required different treatment. Carrots, turnips, and other roots were packed in moist sand inside wooden barrels or stone-lined pits buried below the frost line. This kept them from drying out while also preventing decay. These vegetables essentially went into a winter rest, much like hibernating animals, though they were destined for the cooking pot later. Traditional root storage pits usually maintain temperatures between 33 and 40 degrees, ideal for keeping the plants alive through the cold months. Delicate herbs often received more personal care. Many were kept in pots and moved indoors, either into homes or monastery rooms, where they survived until spring returned. These living herbs provided fresh flavor for meals, while also ensuring the next year's garden had healthy starter plants. While their seeds and roots waited for warmer weather, medieval farmers made another discovery about winter itself. Cold weather was not always the enemy. Over time, they learned that snow and ice could actually help their crops survive. These resourceful growers turned seasonal hardships into natural aids. Snow served as a protective blanket for planted fields. A thick snow layer kept the soil beneath it much warmer than the air above. During severe cold spells, the temperature under snow could be 30 degrees higher than the open air. Medieval farmers recognized snow as nature's own insulation, long before anyone had thought of electric heating blankets. Just add a snowstorm and watch the crops stay comfortable. Winter grains like wheat and rye especially thrived under snow's protection. Fields that remained covered in snow throughout the cold season often produced 20% more grain than those exposed to harsh air. Another clever trick involved managing water through ice. Farmers would create shallow ponds during autumn that froze over as winter arrived. When spring returned, the melting ice released water gradually, feeding nearby fields just when young plants began to grow. These farmers were running the slowest irrigation system imaginable frozen solid in winter, then coming to life when spring pressed the natural defrost button. This system worked perfectly in regions that often suffered from dry spells early in the growing season. Historical records describe designated ice fields that could supply water for up to 3 weeks during that crucial time. Freezing and thawing also helped transform stubborn soil. Heavy clay, nearly impossible to work when damp, became easier to handle after a winter of freezing temperatures. By plowing before winter and leaving rough furrows exposed, farmers let nature do the hard labor for them. As the soil froze and thawed again and again, large clumps crumbled into fine particles, creating a smooth seedbed without any extra effort. Frost worked like a natural soil blender, breaking apart tough ground without using a single drop of energy. This approach could reduce the work required for spring planting by as much as 40%. Winter barley fields also took advantage of melting snow. Farmers often sowed seeds just before the first expected snowfall. Those seeds rested beneath the snow until temperatures warmed. When the snow melted, the moisture soaked into the soil and triggered quick germination. This early start gave seedlings protection from early spring dryness, allowing them to emerge 7 to 10 days earlier than crops planted later. With winter's chill now working in their favor, farmers turned their attention to another challenge: harvesting at exactly the right time. Choosing the perfect moment to gather crops meant the difference between full storerooms and empty stomachs. Their solution was staggered harvesting. Instead of bringing in everything at once, farmers collected crops in organized stages. Their schedule was almost as detailed as a royal ceremony, but far more practical. The first harvests focused on quick-growing vegetables, while hardier plants stayed in the soil a little longer. Many communities divided their land into several harvest zones, each with specific collection times based on generations of careful weather observation. Root vegetables harvested late in the season received special attention. Turnips, parsnips, and similar crops remained in the ground until the last possible moment before deep frost. These patient plants were the latecomers of the medieval farm, lingering until the soil cooled. Interestingly, this wait improved both their flavor and storage quality. Roots dug just before the first hard freeze could last up to 30% longer than those taken earlier, giving families fresh food well into winter. Frost even improved the taste of some vegetables. Plants like kale and certain cabbages became noticeably sweeter after a light frost. The cold transformed their starches into sugars, turning bitter greens into something pleasant to eat. Frost was nature's sugar dust, enhancing both flavor and nutrition. Monastery notes reveal that kale picked after 3 frosts held up to 40% more vitamin C than kale harvested in summer. Such careful timing demanded remarkable knowledge of weather. Communities relied on natural signs to predict the first killing frost. They studied cloud patterns, animal activity, and even the thickness of onion skins to forecast cold snaps. These traditional methods proved accurate nearly 70% of the time, often predicting frost within 5 days. Once the harvest was safely stored, medieval farmers still had another challenge to face. Even during freezing months, they found ways to grow fresh greens when everything outside was buried in snow. Fresh vegetables were essential for staying healthy through winter, when most people survived on dried or preserved foods. Small indoor gardens thrived in unexpected spots. Monasteries led the movement in winter cultivation, transforming stone structures into protective green spaces. Monastic kitchens often maintained miniature herb gardens in sunny, south-facing windows. Plants such as thyme, chives, and parsley continued to grow through the darkest months. These monks were the original indoor gardeners, tending their plants with care centuries before anyone posted about houseplants online. Thanks to steady indoor warmth and regular watering, these gardens yielded surprising amounts of herbs. Records from one German monastery show that they gathered fresh herbs twice each week through the coldest months, providing valuable vitamin C when scurvy was a constant threat. Outdoor gardeners also discovered how to use compost for heat. Decomposing manure and plant matter generate remarkable warmth, sometimes exceeding 100 degrees at the center of large piles. Resourceful farmers positioned hardy greens, such as young kale and certain herbs, close to these steaming mounds. The result was a natural heating system, a medieval version of a spa for plants, without the chatter. The warmth allowed plants to continue slow growth, even in freezing air. Soil within a few feet of these compost heaps could remain as much as 20 degrees warmer than the rest of the garden, creating perfect winter microclimates. When all else failed, people turned to sprouted grains for a supply of fresh green food. Wheat, rye, and barley were soaked and sprouted indoors, ensuring families could still enjoy living, nutritious plants even while winter raged outside. These sprouted grains could be cultivated in almost any kind of container, with very little light, and still provided impressive nutrition. Growing sprouts in the Middle Ages was essentially a lazy person's version of salad farming. No need to weed, no months of waiting, just water the grains and let time do the work. Sprouted grains contained nearly 40% more nutrients than their unsprouted versions and were ready to eat in about 5 to 7 days. This fast-growing food helped people survive the winter when other fresh produce disappeared. Some villages even built partial underground growing spaces where the steady warmth of the earth kept sprouts from freezing. South-facing stone walls absorbed the sun's rays during the day and released warmth through the night, creating a small-scale greenhouse effect. With these creative ways to produce greens during the coldest months, farmers still had to solve one more major problem. They needed to keep their soil fertile through the freezing season without any of the modern equipment we have today. Their smart soil management often meant the difference between a full pantry and hunger when spring finally came. Field rotation was their main secret for keeping land productive. Farmers divided their land into 3 large sections and used each differently every year. One section grew winter grains, the next produced spring crops, and the third was left empty for recovery. This resting land was called fallow. It might have looked like wasted space, but it gave the soil time to rebuild its strength and nutrients. Historical records show that this simple rotation system increased crop yields by roughly 1/3 compared to fields used continuously. Farmers also kept their soil healthy with natural fertilizers. Wood ash from cooking fires was full of useful minerals. Instead of throwing it away, they gathered it and spread it across their fields. Crushed animal bones mixed into the soil added extra nourishment that helped crops develop strong roots, just what plants needed to face the cold. Some farmers joked that giving bones to the soil was like feeding breakfast to the earth itself. Cover crops were another clever trick to protect the land after harvest. As soon as one crop was taken out, they planted quick-growing plants such as clover. These plants had special abilities. They could draw nitrogen from the air and store it in small nodules on their roots. When farmers plowed them into the ground in spring, that nitrogen became natural fertilizer for the next crop. The cover plants also kept valuable topsoil from washing away in heavy rain or melting snow. A well-known technique called marling was especially common in colder areas. Farmers dug up chalky clay from deep layers of soil and spread it on their fields. This substance balanced the acidity of the earth and improved fertility. The right to dig this clay was so important that it was often included in farm contracts. It was backbreaking work, leading farmers to joke that they were feeding rocks to dirt and hoping it would give back bread. Sheep and cattle became moving fertilizer machines through smart grazing systems. After harvest, animals were allowed to graze freely on crop remains. They got food, and the soil received fresh manure in return. Farmers even used movable fences to make sure the animals fertilized every section evenly. An old saying claimed that a sheep's foot brought gold to the land it stepped on. Green manuring was another valuable method. Farmers planted crops like mustard with the full intention of plowing them under before harvest. Once buried, the green plants broke down and released nutrients into the soil, improving its texture and fertility. This was especially useful for remote fields where carrying manure was difficult. Winter soil care also meant digging trenches to help water drain away. If too much water froze in the ground, it could kill roots and delay planting when spring arrived. Fields that drained properly could be worked several weeks earlier than those that did not, a huge advantage where every extra day mattered. Snow itself turned out to be a blessing. The soft covering acted like insulation, protecting the life hidden in the soil beneath. Farmers often looked for tiny jumping creatures, known as snow fleas, on sunny winter days, believing their presence showed that the soil was alive and healthy. When the final frost vanished, these carefully tended fields stood ready for seed, closing the winter's hard work and opening the hopeful season of spring planting.